being here. I really appreciate it. I know it's Sunday afternoon, and thank you for coming in. So nice to see people that I know here that came. Thank you. I am, because I'm a visual person, I have my laptop here with some images, and it's going to help guide me through this talk. I'm not going to read from the book, but I'm going to tell you why I created the book and what I'm working on now, and a little bit about the book. I think that's the best way to do it. I grew up, I think, holding a camera from the time, this is a picture of me when I was 5 years old. I always loved image making and storytelling. I was the crazy, weird kid who would put a tape recorder on the table when everybody was talking, when the fruits and nuts came out. I'm Italian, so if any of you have had these long, very extended meals, we would have these extended meals, and the best stories came out when the wine and the fruits and the dried nuts and everything came out. And I was lucky enough really to grow up in my grandmother's kitchen. And my grandmother gratefully lived to be 103 and a half, she likes to say and a half. It's so funny, as we get older, we count, like, when we were younger, we'd say, well, I'm almost 7. And I think the same thing happens as we age, we do the same thing. But my grandmother, I was lucky enough to have her around for a very long time. And when she was 97, she came to visit me. She lived in Florida. She always said she was from the Bronx, but she actually lived in Florida for 50 years of her life. She came to visit me out here in California, in San Luis Obispo. And she was an amazing cook who never wrote a recipe down. So all of you cooks that are really good, you should be writing your recipes down, because we want to savor them and have them. But I realized that I had this amazing opportunity, because for 4 summers she spent the month of August with me out here. If you've ever been to Florida in August, you know that was a very wise decision. California is much nicer. But I thought, here she is, and she's this amazing cook, and I not only want to write her recipes down, but I actually want to film them. And that was really my first foray into doing any video work, was filming my grandmother in the kitchen, cooking her lentil soup or her biscotti or whatever it was. I did that. And there is actually a Vimeo series that I have called Cucina Nonna, which means Grandma's Kitchen, where you can see all of those videos. And that was when I was really learning how to do this. So I always say, if I can do something like this, you can too. It's really a matter of following your passion and following your ideas. And I went back with my grandmother when she was turning 100. And my grandmother was still working out at the gym. She was amazing. I mean, when I would think, I do yoga every day, and when I think, oh, I don't have the energy, I would think of my grandmother on this little exercise bike, and I would think, get your butt up and go do your yoga practice, because if she can do it, you sure can. So thankfully by that point, I thought I better film her, because nobody's going to believe that 100, she's still working out at the gym. And I put a little mic on her, and I said, hey Grandma, can you give me some words of wisdom? Well, that was the beginning of this whole project, the film, the book, everything else. And she said things like, live life to the limits and be kind. And I came back from that trip, and I thought, I'm 59 now, I was looking at approaching 50. And looking for positive role models of aging, and thankfully there are many more of them out there now than there were 10 or 12 years ago when I was starting this project. But I was only seeing the negative aspects of aging, and in my own life I had this incredible grandmother. And so I thought, which by the way, the film is on PBS. Who would have thought my grandma would end up on PBS, which I think is so cool. But I thought, I know other people out there that are 75 plus who are living amazing lives, and I want to find them. I didn't know I was going to do a film. I just knew I had to find those people and interview them. So the first person I started with, some of you may know, Jesse Alexander, who is here, local photographer. I worked for him for many years. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start with him because I know him, and if I really screw it up, he'll let me redo it. And we had such a good time together, and it was such a great first interview that I decided I'm going to send out an email blast to all my friends, family, and alum. I teach at the university. I've been there for 30 years, and I'm going to ask them, do you have somebody in your life that's as much an inspiration as my grandmother is to me? And I was inundated by heartwarming nominations. And this is Lucky Louie, who lives right around the corner from me. He made fresh mozzarellas for his daughter's deli every morning. He became my favorite. I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but other than my grandmother, this was like my favorite dude. He was so amazing. His motto was, happiness is a state of mind. You can be happy with what you have or miserable with what you don't have. You decide. And that sticks with me to this day. I mean, it's so amazing. So I spent 4 years interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. And it was just an incredible journey. I learned so much along the way. I think that many times in our lives, we're so busy, we forget to just stop and talk to people and hear their stories and what we can learn from them. And I also learned along this journey that the last 100 years is the first time in human history that we have looked to anyone other than our elders for advice. And I feel the world is suffering as a result. And so it was such a gift to take this time to listen to all these incredible, remarkable people. I mean, this is Rose Albano Ballesteros, who's still a dear friend of mine to this day. And at the time that I interviewed her, she was 80, and she said, even though I'm 80, I'm 6 units shy of my PhD. No matter what age you are, learning never stops. And I carry these messages that these incredible people really imparted on me through this time. And this is C.L. Bergman, who is also no relation to me. We have the same last name, but she was a professor here at the university at UCSB for many years. And she actually nominated her partner, Ed Oken, to be in the film, and I said, no. I will interview Ed, but I need to interview you as well, because for those of you that don't know her, she was really an environmental activist, artist, and she just did some incredible work to bring awareness to the environment. This is Santi Vasali, who I just saw like an hour ago. He's got 2 quotes that I love from the film. Marriage is like a rubber band. You can only stretch it so far, and then it will break. If you want to have a good marriage, then you have to relax it back. That's such good advice for a relationship. And then the other thing that he said that really struck me was, an Indian chief once said, leave good tracks, and I am trying to leave good tracks. So leaving good things behind. I met some of the people, as you can see, I knew, but most of the people I didn't know. This is Marion and Paul Wolf, who both survived World War II. They were Jewish. Paul was from Hamburg. His family was able to escape. Marion actually, so this is Paul. He was also taught at Cal Poly in the architecture department. This is Marion, who she was amazing. She came over on the very first Kinder transport from Vienna, Austria. For those of you that don't know what that is, and I didn't before I interviewed her, it was the Quakers in the United Kingdom were trying to rescue as many Jewish children as they could before the war, and they saved 10,000 children by placing them with foster parents in the UK. And she was on the very first one. And I remember when I interviewed her, up to that point, I thought I was just making like these webisodes. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but when I interviewed her, and she actually had, and I think I have a picture of it later on, the cardboard number that they gave her to wear around her neck when she went on that Kinder transport to identify her. And that was so, I still get chills when I think about it. That was so moving to me that I thought, this is more than just a web series. I need to make a feature film. I'd never done that before. Why I thought I could do it, I don't know, but it just dawned on me that these stories really needed to be shared, that they were being lost. And it was just incredible. I mean, you can see my setup. I have 2 little cameras, dinky little cameras, nothing major. Really, I learned along the way how to do things. It really was, we have a motto at Cal Poly, learn by doing, and I was living that motto as I was doing this film. So what did I learn along the way? There were several things that I learned from all the people, the common threads that I think from all the people, and this is what's in the book, by the way. I'm kind of, instead of reading from the book, I'm paraphrasing, let's say. So everyone needs a sense of purpose, and I think that sense of purpose can change over time, but no matter what age you are, everyone needs a sense of purpose. For Lucky Louie, it was making mozzarellas for his daughter's deli every day. He was a pediatrician, by the way, for 50 years before he turned to mozzarella making. For Rose Albano Ballesteros, it was teaching ESL in high schools for many years. So everyone needs a sense of purpose. This is another person that I interviewed for the film, Bozzo Corascelli. He was 93 when I interviewed him. And I love his quote, "I look forward to the next hour, the next day, and no plans. I take what comes and absorb it as much as I can, mentally, physically, emotionally, visibly, audibly, I drink it up." Really living in the moment. And I really, again, I take all of these quotes that I had from these people, and I hear them all the time. And I had so many people that said you should write a book, and that's why the book came about. So the second thing is having a sense of community. And what was really interesting to me was that sense of community. It wasn't necessarily family. It could be friends, but having people that you could call on that would check on you. We all had this crazy time of the pandemic and COVID, but we still figured out ways to have community. Maybe it was a Zoom meeting or a Zoom family call or a Zoom community call. Ways that we can have a sense of community. This is Barbara Jacino, and her quote is, "The secret to a happy life is having good friends who support you." I know this has been incredibly important in my own life. And how true is that? I mean, we can all think of that one or two people that support us, our community, our people that we want to be around. And, last year, the U.S. Surgeon General declared an epidemic of social isolation, and he warned that about half of U.S. older adults are experiencing considerable levels of loneliness. So research has shown that loneliness is as bad for people's health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's pretty remarkable. So whatever we can do to avert that, create your sense of community. And I love this quote from Helen Keller: "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." So the third thing that I've learned along the way is it's kind of this positivity and attitude, of really having a positive attitude. And remembering that your attitude is really the only thing that you have control over. And when I interviewed Ebby Justison for the film, she talked about reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't know if any of you have read that book. It's a very powerful book. For those of you that might not have read it, he was a Holocaust survivor, and he talked about his time in the camps and not being able to tell who was going to make it through based on their physical strength. It was much more about their attitude. And that really struck home for me. There's so many times when we can't control what's happening around us. The one thing we can control is our attitude about how we deal with those things. And so attitude and positivity, I think, go hand in hand. And this is Rachel Rin-Yan. So amazing. She always had a smile on her face. And her quote, I have it here: "When I wake up in the morning, I expect something good to happen. I don't exactly know what it would be, and sometimes it's postponed until the next day or the day after, but inevitably there's something wonderful that will happen." And I think that positive spirit, no matter what happened to her, she always could put a positive spin on things. I think the fourth thing that everyone had in common was this idea of resilience. So, maybe it was that generation. They went through a lot, especially because of World War II, but we have gone through a lot. And if we talk to young people, they go through a lot. Everybody goes through different things, but this sense of resilience, and this is one of my favorite quotes from the film. My friend who worked with me on the film, and we went to a lot of film festivals together, we would kind of rib each other when this would come up, because she had a very thick, heavy German accent when she would say this: "Life plays with you, doesn't it? And if you can manage it, you have to battle it. It's a jungle out there." And, she also went through World War II, being Jewish, having to leave her home, moving to Argentina, but still having that positive attitude. This is Emmy Cleaves, who I interviewed her because she is a yogini, amazing woman, and she does the yoga that I do and teaches it, and I want to still be doing that when I'm in my 90s, so I wanted to interview somebody that was doing it. What I didn't know was that during World War II, she escaped Riga, Latvia with her mom, ended up in a camp somewhere, escaped the camp, and then got to a train platform and was handing stuff up to her mom on the train platform, and the doors closed and the train took off. And she was 16 years old. And I think, just like I do with Marion, who was 8 when she was sent on the Kindertransport, and Emmy when she was left alone in the middle of a war at 16, what was I doing at that age? How resilient would I be? And these are people that somehow have been able to look back on their lives, and these things happen, but they're able to look forward with a positive attitude. And that really, this is Marion. That's her on the left, because I actually found footage of her when she was coming off of the Kindertransport, and that was her on the right. And, it's just amazing to think about that. But really, for me, those 4 things are so key, and I think that I will take them forever away in my life. And I talk more in depth in the book about all 4 of those things. But for me, one of the best things about doing this film were the friendships that I made with these older adults. And I feel like I have 40 new grandparents as a result of doing this film. Evie being one of them. She's now in her 90s, and I see her for lunch probably every couple of weeks. Lou Tadone, as I mentioned, I would go over to his house and hang out with him while he made mozzarellas every morning. And I was lucky enough, I grew up in an intergenerational household. This is me with my mom, my great-grandmother, and my grandmother. So I grew up with 4 generations, and I know that that's unique. But I really wanted to do something where I could bring generations together. And I was lucky enough to team up with somebody at Cal Poly, where I teach, who teaches a class called The Psychology of Aging. And for the past 10 years, we have been doing a joint project where we bring older adults and students that are in her class together. They watch the Lives Well Lived film, and then they use the questions that I formulated for the interviews to get to know each other. So they spend basically 2 months really getting to know each other and having these wonderful conversations. Because I think the hardest thing when you meet somebody is, what do you ask them? How do you start an interview? And just saying, tell me something about yourself, is too open-ended. So having that list of 20 questions as a starting point is really helpful. And then at the end, I do a big photo shoot, which is really fun. So we get to see what they're like, together. And you can see the bonds that are created in such a short period of time. And, it's just such a wonderful experience, because, of course, what they find is that we have far more in common than our differences. And the biggest difference in this case is age, and that's it. And once we put that aside, the older adults learn from the students and vice versa. And I really feel like we're combating the stereotypes of ageism, one story and one connection at a time. And it's such a gift for me to do these photo shoots and see the pairs of students and older adults coming together, and the joy that they have in getting to be with each other and learning from each other, and just, they remain friends. It's just so wonderful. So that has kind of put me on a different trajectory in some ways, doing this project. And this is just a small portion of the number of people that we've paired up. By the way, during the pandemic, we did this project. We worked with Senior Planet, which is part of AARP, and did it online. So we didn't let it just fall by the wayside during the pandemic. We figured out another way to make it happen. And at the end of the quarter, the students are tasked with answering these questions. What is the older adult's secret to a life well lived? What's their definition of a life well lived? How have I learned, and what have I changed from this project? And what's the biggest takeaway? And they do a little PowerPoint presentation, which is really fun to see. It's also, if any of you are educators, the Lives Will Live, this whole intergenerational project, is on the PBS Learning Media site, so they can use it for free, which I think is awesome. And then the book came about. So when I decided to write this book, because like I said, I had so many people that asked me, well, can you synthesize? What did you learn from interviewing all these people? From the people who were taking furious notes as they were watching the film. So I spent 3 years writing this book, but in addition to just talking about my experiences and what I learned, I also interviewed 40 people around the globe, 40 organizations that are doing really interesting work connecting generations, because I do feel like that is the way of the future. We live in such an age-segregated world. What can we do to bring generations together? And so I'm just showing you a few of the many that are in the book. Stoop Stories started in Brooklyn, New York, where they go out on the stoops. It started during the pandemic because people could talk to each other out on their stoops, and generations coming together on their stoops. Cycling Without Age started in Denmark, and there's actually a chapter here in Santa Barbara, and I think they showed a film recently about this organization. Another really great organization where you have a younger person who's pedaling and older people in the front, and they're talking, they're sharing stories as they're going on these journeys. Sages and Seekers, this is based out of Los Angeles, pairing older adults and young students together, kind of what we do with the project, Lives Will Live project. 3G, which is 3 generations. This is actually Sesame Street, done by Sesame Street alum, like people that have worked at Sesame Street. And they have 3 different generations. So they have older adults mentoring teenagers who are mentoring preschoolers, which I think is really lovely. And they use Sesame Street clips to help the preschoolers learn about different ideas, and it's the teenagers that are teaching the preschoolers, and then the older adults don't go in on that segment of it. They just talk to the students, the teenagers, about what they're doing and what they're learning, and it's great. Alive Inside, this is another really great, another film that kind of turned into a movement. This guy, he put music onto iPods and then put them in people's ears who have dementia, and all of a sudden you could literally see them come alive inside because they put music on from when they were younger. It's an incredible project. He created a foundation, and now they have students going into nursing homes and assisted living facilities to spread that project. Eldera is another one, where it's more about using the wisdom of elders and bringing that into older adults. And I wanted to talk about a couple of other projects that I'm working on, because it's always nice. Everybody always says, well, what do you do? That's great, but what are you doing now? So here's the answer to that question. This is Susie Edelbauman, who I interviewed for Lives Will Live. Was really important for me to tell the story of the Japanese internment during World War II. So I really wanted to make sure that I interviewed somebody that had lived through that, and Susie was one of those people, and her story is remarkable. I feel like it's really easy to say all those things happened in other places and to forget about our own country and what we did to a group of our own people in this country. And but Susie and I have become fast friends, and she invited me to a mochisuki. So for those of you that don't know what mochisuki is, it's a Japanese tradition that you make mochi, which how many of you even know what mochi is? Okay, some people do. Mochi is rice that's cooked and then pounded until it's kind of the consistency of bread dough and formed into mochi balls. And you probably see mochi ice cream and all these other things that have become the Americanized version of it. But I can do it from here. So she invited me to go to one of these mochisuki ceremonies, and I was hooked. And so the next year I brought my camera with me because it's so beautiful. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, I grew up in my grandmother's kitchen. I loved going to this and seeing all these generations coming together through food and connecting, and the wisdom and the love that was passed on from one generation to the next. So there's me photographing and filming. So you probably have seen mochi ice cream, like I said. And the other part of this story is that, which you wouldn't necessarily know just by looking at me, my brother is married to a Japanese woman and lives in Japan, and I have 2 Japanese American nephews. There's 1 and there's 2. And so I love being able to connect to their culture and learn a little bit more about their culture as well. So the way the mochi is made, you steam rice. It's absolutely visually just stunning. And then there's an usu, and you can see the mallets, and they put the rice that's steamed into the usu and they pound. It's an amazing sound as well because you hear it being pounded there. And again, now they have all different ages that are coming in there and doing it. Traditionally, I think it was the big strong guys, but they let everybody in and to do it. And then they bring this bread dough over to a table, and you can see that the balls are formed there. So again, really nice, and you haven't actually participated unless you have mochi flour on your cheeks. So everybody walks around with this white flour on their cheeks, and this is what it looks like when it's done. I should probably not admit it, but I don't particularly care for mochi because it's so chewy and I never know quite when to swallow. So you have to grow up. It's like an acquired taste. I love the tradition around it. I love the bringing together of generations through food. And here you can see the generations coming together. Let's see, I think I'm going to skip the video because I think it's going to be too hard to do. So the other project that I'm working on, there's 2 people that are in this project here, is called the Primetime Band. And let me go back one here. So that is me playing bassoon. So I was a band geek when I was a kid, and I found that, crazily enough, in some yearbook picture online, right before I was introduced to the conductor for the Primetime Band, which is a band here that practices you guys should talk about it more than me, because you guys are in it, they rehearse every Tuesday night. It used to be ages 50 and up, now it's ages 40 and up. And then they perform throughout the county. The big performance is a July 4th performance at the courthouse. And I love this idea of people, probably because I'm doing it myself, playing an instrument and coming back to it later in life. And again, that sense of purpose, I think it hits all the high notes of the 4 things that I talked about: purpose, community, resilience. Because there's one person who plays flute. She can't hold the flute up. She has a headstock that's like this so she can play it. I mean, the stories, people with Parkinson's, people with all different kinds of ailments that still figure out how to come in and be part of it. And it's just amazing. There's the flute, so you can see that flute like that. So that is my little spiel. If any of you want to get in touch with me, I have cards that I can give out. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your attention, and hopefully I made it interesting for all of you. Thank you so much.
Does anybody have any questions for Sky? Did you want to say something? Oh. How do you find all this time to do all this?
I don't sleep much. Really, I think when you have a passion for things, it just happens. I really didn't sleep much when I was doing the Lives Will Live film, but that's because I was so excited about what I was working on. And I think follow your passion, follow those threads. You never know where they're going to take you. I'm curious. I love storytelling, and I just keep doing that. I've retired from teaching. I'm only teaching part-time now, so I have a little more time to work on my projects. And yeah, I just love it. Love what you do. That's how you find the time.
Well, obviously you have a connection with your grandmother, but was there something as a child that really stuck with you about your grandmother?
I think my grandmother had the capacity to be kind to everyone. I mean, no matter who it was. And she had this saying, "Lungo brado," lengthen the broth. So no matter how, if somebody came in, you feed them, you cook for them. That's how she showed her love. And I think her motto is always just to be kind. And I think that's what I take away from my grandmother and try and do in my own life. Is I think of my grandmother all the time. I challenge her. I think of her all the time. Yeah.
I read a lot of our local papers. There was recently an article on something that I think called the Master Plan of Aging in Santa Barbara County. Do you know anything about that?
I live in San Luis Obispo County, so I don't know specifically about Santa Barbara, but there are. I was part of the California Master Plan for Aging, and they are doing some planning, because let's face it, we have baby boomers who are getting older. We have an aging population. There will be far more people that are over 65 than under 25 in the next few years, if it's not already happened. So we need to have a plan in place for that. Yeah.
Do you know what they're planning on doing? I mean,
I don't know specifically, but I know that you can look it up. I think it's more like logistically, how do we deal with that? There's just different services that are going to be needed, different resources that are going to have to be spent in certain ways. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Where are you going to be spending your next few years? What are you working on again, if you can?
My next few years, I am, my partner Jeff and I have made a plan that we're going to try and be in Europe for 3 months out of 6 months. So we're going to be back and forth, which I think is nice to take a break. When I go there, I really take a break from everything. And I was talking to my friend Patty before about just taking a break and leaving it all behind. Sometimes we need to do that so we can be better at whatever we do. And then I have the films that I've talked about that I'm going to be wrapping up. So, and enjoying life, every moment. Just enjoy every moment. Yeah, every moment's a gift.
Well, your enthusiasm is very infectious. So
Thank you.
her book is Lives Well Lived Generations. Thank you, Sky Bergman, for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.